Welcome to Module 6 of Fundamentals of Chemistry. In this module, we're going to focus on the representation of molecular structure, drawing and to some extent interpreting Lewis structures, which are a common and really important formalism for depicting how atoms are arranged in molecules, how they're connected, and to some extent where electrons are located. So let's walk through our learning objectives for this module. First, we're going to learn how to infer the number of valence electrons in a neutral atom from the position of its element on the periodic table, and we'll talk about what valence electrons are and why they're so important for chemistry. And we'll learn in general terms how to draw Lewis structures. I've kind of broken this down into some sub-objectives, drawing Lewis symbols, connecting them together into what we'll call a skeletal structure, and then filling in the rest to generate a full-blown Lewis structure, distinguishing between electrons that we'll call bonding and non-bonding. And then we'll look at some general guidelines for Lewis structures. The octet rule, which is really more of an octet guideline, as we'll see, for how electrons are arranged typically in Lewis structures. And then we'll look at how charge manifests itself in Lewis structures, both in the structures of ions and neutral molecules that happen to have positive or negative charges located on atoms. We have a system for assigning charge to an atom. That system is known as the formal charge, quote unquote. And we'll learn how that works and be able to identify formal charges, assign formal charges ourselves by the end of this module. So the general goal here is to give you a comfort and familiarity with drawing and especially interpreting Lewis structures that you come across in your introductory chemistry courses. More often than not, really regardless of where you're headed in your future or career, you won't be drawing Lewis structures from scratch. You'll be making an educated guess based on what you've seen previously, or you'll be interpreting a structure that's actually just given to you. And so a lot of what we'll talk about here in practice here is toward the end of interpretation, making sure that what you're looking at is actually not, riddled with errors or having some kind of problem, or is abnormal, right? Maybe it's correct, but not something you've seen before, or not something that's typical in terms of, for example, the number of bonds to an atom or the formal charge on an atom, something like this. I have a colleague who likes to say that a lot of chemistry education is learning when to be surprised. And so part of what we're doing here is learning when to be surprised when we come across a structure and when not to be surprised because what we're looking at is very typical. Let's start by defining exactly what we mean by a structure. So the structure of a molecule. Well, first of all, let's back up. What is a molecule? A molecule is a collection of atoms that repeats itself within a compound zillions and zillions and zillions of times, and the molecule represents kind of the fundamental unit of identity for the compound. So the structure of the molecule is a representation of the identity of the compound, and it contains a huge amount of implicit information about physical and chemical properties. And this is why structure is so important. It's a shorthand for properties. For those who understand how to do that act of sort of interpreting the structure to infer properties, molecular structures are extremely valuable. Let me back up to the previous bullet now and talk about what exactly we mean by structure. The structure of a molecule is a representation of the distribution of nuclei and electrons in the molecule. We're interested in where those atomic nuclei are sitting. We tend to represent those with element symbols, and then where the electrons are located. And we represent these either as lines to indicate bonds where electrons are shared between two atoms, or pairs of dots. And these indicate electron pairs that are located on an atom singularly, kind of belonging to one atom. That's what we call a non-bonding pair, or more commonly a lone pair, or belonging to two atoms, in which case we'd be looking at a bonding pair represented as a line. And often what we'll do is go from a molecular formula representation, something like OCF2 that you see right here, to an educated guess for the molecular structure, which is going to include all those element symbols and all of the electrons implicitly or explicitly that each of those atoms brings into the molecule. And so all the complexity really is wrapped up in this arrow right here. And we're going to learn how to make an educated inference from molecular structure to molecular structure or structural formula, if you like, in this module. Let's talk about electrons in atoms. The most important idea when you're starting out with thinking about electrons within molecules and even within atoms on a bit of a deeper level than just they're there, is that atomic electrons are organized in layers. Atomic electrons are organized in layers. There's an innermost layer and then a layer after that one and a layer after that one until we essentially run out of electrons, right? And we've reached the outer edge of the atom, if you will. In class, I often say the atom is like an onion. Onions have layers. What is that from again? And the students always remind me, it's from Shrek. So I always think of Shrek at this moment in the semester. Atoms are like onions. The layers of the onion in the atom are called shells, and each shell gets a number. You'll learn in your introductory chemistry course that this number is represented with the variable n. And you can think of that for our purposes as the shell number. Shell number 1, 2, 3, 4. It's literally just a counting number that can get, in practice, as high as 5 or 6 based on the size of the periodic table. Within each shell, though, there are multiple sort of sublayers, you might say, and these are called subshells. And there are 4 different types of subshells that show up within shells. And these we actually represent with letters, S, P, D, and F. And those letters refer to the different shapes of the spaces that electrons can occupy. I won't say more than that for the time being. That's all you really need to know for the time being when it comes to thinking about drawing structures. The bullet points below are important to note. Each shell only contains certain subshells, and each subshell can only hold a certain maximum number of electrons. And so when we think about where electrons are located inside the atom, each subshell only has a certain number of seats on the bus, if you like, or chairs in the room, or chairs in the building, I often like to say. And subshells fill when that number of electrons has been placed into the subshell. 2 for an S subshell, 6 for a P subshell, 10 for the D subshells, and 14 for the F subshells. And they fill generally within a shell in that order. S first, followed by P, D, and F. I'll preface this by saying that this representation right here is not physically realistic at all. It's really only meant to evoke the idea that there are different layers in the atom. Those layers are called shells, and the sublayers within each shell are called subshells. So here in the middle, for example, we have the n equals 1 shell, and it's got one subshell called the 1s. And then for the second shell, n equals 2, we have 2s and 2p subshells, a little bit farther from the nucleus. The n equals 2 shell is bigger than the n equals 1 shell. And then even further out from that, we have the n equals 3 shell with 3s, 3p, and 3d subshells, and so on outward from there for bigger atoms. When it comes to drawing Lewis structures, you'll actually spend most of your time thinking about those first 3 shells, n equals 1 to n equals 3, because once you get down to n equals 4 and below, structure gets complicated. Most of the atoms are metallic, most of the elements are metallic, and so structure gets a little bit different down there, and Lewis structures become a lot more ambiguous, I would say. Now, if we're talking about elements in the 3rd row of the periodic table, let's say, that's a lot of electrons to deal with, right? If we look at an element like, I don't know, bromine, a neutral bromine atom has 35 electrons. Does that mean we're going to have 35 dots and lines in a Lewis structure? Well, no, because the good news is most of those electrons don't matter. Electrons in the inner shells of an atom, relatively close to the nucleus, are called core electrons, and those inner shells are called core shells. The cool thing about core shells is that generally we don't have to care about them at all. They're so close to the nucleus and the electrons so strongly attracted to the nucleus that all core electrons do, generally, is just follow their nuclei around. And in molecular structures, this is certainly true. We can represent core electrons just by writing an element's symbols. For an element like bromine, 28 of the 35 electrons are just represented with the symbol Br in a Lewis structure, because 28 of those 35 electrons, we'll talk about counting this here shortly, are core electrons. The electrons in the outermost shell, these are the ones that are really important. The electrons in the outermost shell, they're called valence electrons, and that shell is called the valence shell. And this word valence is meant to evoke the idea of bonding, covalent bonding specifically. Now, how do we figure out which shell is the valence shell? Well, here's a neat little fact about the periodic table that helps us figure this out. The period number of an element on the periodic table is equal to the shell number of the valence shell. For example, hydrogen, the very first element, is obviously in period 1. The valence shell of hydrogen is n equals 1. Nitrogen is in the second row of the periodic table, period 2. The valence shell of a nitrogen atom is the second shell, n equals 2. For chlorine, chlorine is in the third row of the periodic table, atomic number 17, and its valence shell is n equals 3, the third shell, and so on and so forth, right? So we can figure out the identity of the valence shell just from the row in which we find that element on the periodic table. The column number also tells us something profoundly important, the number of valence electrons inside that valence shell. This is determined by the column number, or group number is the term we typically use. This is equal to the number of valence electrons in the atom for groups 1 and 2, and for groups 13 through 18, we subtract 10, since we've got 10 transition elements sort of getting in the way there in the middle that don't contribute to the valence electron count. So we have 1 valence electron in hydrogen, for example. We have 2 valence electrons. Well, let me start with the second row. 1 valence electron in lithium, 2 in beryllium. If we jump to group 13, 3 in boron, 4 in carbon, 5 in nitrogen, 6 in oxygen, 7 in fluorine, and 8 in neon. Now, the noble gases, or inert gases, I should mention, get a little weird here, right? Because the outermost shell is filled in group 18. And so what you want to call valence electrons, right? Are they in the outermost shell that's filled, or is the valence shell empty in the noble gases? It's a bit of semantics there, but the most important place where you'll use this idea is in groups 1 through 2 and 13 through 17 for sure. So we can use the ideas on this slide then to infer the number of valence electrons that an atom brings into a molecular structure. Those valence electrons are what we're going to use to connect atoms together and depict lone pairs, so finding this number correctly is a really important first step when we're drawing molecular structures. We'll see this come into play very shortly when we start to draw Lewis structures. I alluded to this earlier, but only the valence electrons really matter when it comes to chemistry of elements and compounds, really. Only the valence electrons are involved in bonding and chemical reactivity. And so we can ignore the core electrons completely, and we're going to shove those or fold those into element symbols. And so we generally don't need to worry about those. We only count valence electrons when drawing Lewis structures. And here's another cool corollary of this idea. Elements in the same column of the periodic table have the same number of valence electrons and display analogous chemistry. They form, for example, similar numbers of bonds and analogous types of compounds and things like this. And I wanted to highlight this with a little example comparing oxygen and sulfur. So oxygen is atomic number 8 on the periodic table. Sulfur is atomic number 16. And the thing we should notice about these elements is that they're both in group 16. And so oxygen being in group 16 means that it has 6 valence electrons, remember we take the group number, and because it's on the right-hand side of the periodic table to the right of the transition metals, we're going to subtract 10 from that group number. And sulfur, well, sulfur is just one step below oxygen here in group 16. And so sulfur as well has 6 valence electrons. The thing we want to notice about this, of course, is that these two numbers of valence electrons are equal to each other. This is going to lead to highly analogous chemistry, where, for example, water forms a compound, H2O, with oxygen linked to 2 hydrogen atoms, and sulfur forms a compound, H2S, with 2 hydrogens linked to the central sulfur atom. And in fact, even the bonding pattern, the way electrons are arranged around the oxygen and the sulfur in these two compounds is exactly the same from a Lewis structure point of view. And so what this allows us to do, and this is a really important general theme in chemistry as a whole, is draw analogies between the chemistry of oxygen and sulfur. If I know something about the chemistry of oxygen, for example, I have good grounds to suspect that sulfur can do something highly similar. In this video, we kind of laid the foundations for thinking about electrons and atoms on a bit of a deeper level, distinguishing between core and valence electrons. And we can count valence electrons now. We're going to use that toward the purpose of drawing Lewis structures in the near future. I'll just leave you with a few lingering questions that you'll address in your introductory chemistry courses. Why are electrons organized into shells and subshells in the atom? This has to do with the physics of the atom and the quantum mechanics underlying how electrons must behave inside the atom. Why do atoms share electrons to form chemical bonds? Something we're going to kind of take as a given, that atoms, quote unquote, want to do this. They want to share electrons to form chemical bonds. The why of this is not terribly complicated to explain, but just not something we're going to have time for in this Fundamentals of Chemistry course. And then the third bullet point is really important to start thinking about. What kinds of information can we glean from a molecular structure? How do we think about that process, starting from a structure that we've drawn or that's been given to us and inferring useful information from it?